in the book Deep Change, Robert Quinn, the author, tells a story about a family that went to the zoo. How many of you have been to the zoo? Sure, you've got one here in town, don't you? This particular zoo was in San Francisco, and before you got to the zoo proper, there was a playground area. And the children all ran over to the playground, and the youngest little boy loved merry-go-rounds. So he got on the merry-go-round and wouldn't even try any of the other toys. The other siblings all tried all the other toys and had a wonderful time there. And they got bored finally and was ready to move on, and they tried to coax the other little brother off of the merry-go-round. And he wasn't going. No way. And so they tried harder, They started complaining and, come on, get off, let's go on. And the mother tried coaxing him off, and he just wouldn't go. And it got to be high drama, how family dramatics goes. And people stopped and started watching all of this yelling and everything. And finally the mother looked at the father like, do something. He's your son. You know those looks? And the father tried coaxing him off, and he loved the merry-go-round. Loved it. And so, give me that handheld mic. And so, the father finally had to literally drag him, kicking and screaming, off of the merry-go-round, because the father knew right around the corner was the carousel of the zoo. A beautiful carousel with the hand-painted horses, and he knew that the little boy, even more than a merry-go-round, loved the carousel. And so for his own good, he drug him off, and people are still watching and still looking to see what's going on. And then when they got around the corner and the little boy saw the carousel, his tears immediately stopped. And he got this big smile on his face, and he ran over and got on one of the wooden horses, and he just had the time of his life. All because his father knew what was best for him. I want to talk to you today about change, about transitions, about how sometimes we are so much like that selfish little boy. It didn't matter that his brothers and sisters wanted to move on. It didn't matter that his mother and father wanted to move on. He wanted to play on his merry-go-round, going round and round and round. He loved it. Sometimes we're like that little boy. We get caught in our life, and we're so satisfied with it, and we're so happy with it, we don't really consider what other people want, or what other changes might be better for us, what other new adventures or new journey God might have in mind for us. One of the wonderful things that I have been encouraged by in the worship survey is that the majority of you actually marked the third option that says, I will be happy with whatever time worship is because I'm going to be at church no matter what. What an awesome outlook on life. Unfortunately, many times in my life, I haven't been like that. I have resisted change. I have been so comfortable in my life, and I didn't want to change, and I didn't want to move. And it literally took my Heavenly Father shaking me, pulling me off of my merry-go-round and saying, but I have something better for you over here. Somehow we often think that Christianity is about comfort, that it's about being comfortable and liking what we have as a Christian. And I don't think anywhere that the Bible teaches us that Christianity is about comfort. I think it teaches us that it is about commitment. Somehow we like to think that when we come to church, we ought to feel warm and comfortable and accepted and loved, and we ought to be stirred by the beautiful music, and we ought to be warmed by the message, and we ought to leave feeling good. I don't think that the Bible teaches us that. I think that the Bible teaches us that Christianity is more about commitment, about sacrifice, about making a difference, about reaching out to others, about what we can do in life. Well, let me get to the testimony part. I was comfortable in a lot of my churches. And God literally shook me out of that comfort to get me to move on. I'm not going to tell you about all of them. We don't have time for all of them. But let me just tell you that one of the churches I served in, I was there for 11 years. I loved that church. It was a little country church. It was just picturesque. The families there had children the same age as my children were. We were great friends. They had great musicians. Brad Hall was a tenor. Oh, my goodness, he could sing. I used to tell him I want him to sing at my funeral. They had great cooks. It was, after all, a Baptist church. And it was so, they didn't fight. They didn't complain. They were just, 11 years of just utter bliss. And undemanding, it was a wonderful little church. And then, that God, he shook me. I went to a simple conference. It was an evangelism conference. And during those 2 days, the speakers, one after another, talked about not being comfortable, about making a difference, about what you were doing in your life to reach out to the lost souls. And I went home the next morning, on Sunday morning, and resigned. Because I knew that God had convicted me that it was time to do something different. And for 2 months then, I sat around and I wondered, why, God, why did you do this? Why did you have me resign? And over and over and over again, the voice came back to me saying, Christianity is not about comfort. It is not about being comfortable. It is not about where we feel good. And after 2 months, I took another job. And it's hardly possible, but this job was even more comfortable. I was an associate pastor. It was a different town, and it was closer to home. I didn't have to drive as much, and it was just right there. It was the church in town that everybody wanted to belong to. You know the kind? It was the church in town that when people moved to town, they automatically came to that church. The mayor was a member there. Somebody was a member of this church. We didn't do evangelism. We didn't do outreach. We didn't have to. They literally came to our door. One of the ladies had died and left the church $1 million. Where's those foundation people? We didn't have to raise money for the foundation. It was there. Not only did the church have $1 million foundation, but the ABW, the UMW, it was UMW, the ladies had $100,000 of their own. Can you imagine ABW ladies having $100,000? You know, the idea of missions in that church was they would give me the church credit card, and I would go to Walmart, and I would buy brand new blue jeans in every single children's size, youth size, and we would take them and give them to the mission. They didn't have to sacrifice a dime of their own. They didn't have to do any outreach, any evangelism, because they had so much money. The youth, we got a certain portion of the $1 million, the interest. We got $45,000 a year for the youth in interest that I could spend any way I wanted to. I tell you what, we had a wonderful, you talk about Summerfest being fun, we did whatever we wanted to. If the youth wanted to go to Six Flags, we went to Six Flags, all expenses paid. If we wanted to go to water parks, we were right across from the high school, so every football and every basketball game, we had what was called fifth quarter, and all the kids would come over, and we would buy pizzas for everybody. It's hard to spend $45,000 on youth. I tried my best. The senior pastor was wonderful. He let me do whatever I wanted to. It was just the dream job. And then God shook me off of my merry-go-round again. And the way he did it this time was in dreams. I kept having a recurring dream. God uses dreams a lot in the Bible, doesn't he? This was really more like a nightmare. Because every night I'd go to bed, and every night I'd be called to heaven, to the throne of God, and there Jesus would say to me, "What are you doing with all that money?" And I'd be like, "Well, we're going to Six Flags, and we're buying blue jeans." And he's like, "What are you doing with all that money?" It was a social church. It was a party church. We were having lots of fun. But we really weren't sacrificing anything of ourselves, or doing any outreach, or doing any mission, or any evangelism, or anything of any kind. About the same time that I kept having that dream over and over and over, a search committee chairman called me from Northern Illinois. Her name was Gertrude. She has passed on to be with the Lord. But Gertrude was the most determined, persistent woman I have ever met in my life. And she kept calling me. I had this dream house, you remember? I had this dream job, even with the nightmares. And she kept calling me and telling me about this little church up in Northern Illinois. And I'm like, Northern Illinois is cold, and I own a convertible. I'm not going there. And she'd say, "Send me your stuff, send me your things." I'm like, "No, really, I'm not interested." She'd call me again the next week. No, I'm really not interested. And to this day, other than I know it was God, I don't know how I ended up there. Other than the persistence of God and Gertrude. I left my dream house that you heard about last week, and we ended up in a 2-story, old, rundown parsonage with orange shag carpet. Do you remember it? The 80s, everywhere. It was ubiquitous. It was everywhere in the house. We took a 2/3 income cut. You remember Mike had the 6 figures? Gone. Sacrifice and commitment. My 8th grade son, Greg, came to me and he said, "I'm not going. My friends are all here. I'm not leaving. I don't want to leave." But what I thought was craziness, what I thought was God shaking me and dragging me off of my merry-go-round was part of his plan and his purpose. To this day, my son Greg, who's 32 now, thanks me almost every year for moving him, for the different path his life took because of that move, because of the friends that he met there in Marengo, because of ultimately his wife that he met. And he thanks me for the difference it made in his life and in ours. I could tell you every transition. I could tell you about the transition to come here. I really didn't want to come to Kansas. I visited Ottawa University one year with Greg, and it was July, and of course it was 104, and they took us everywhere on the campus. And when we left that day, I turned to Greg and I said, "Who in their right mind would ever live in Kansas?" God just laughed. God already had a plan and a purpose. And it's true in all of your lives. The children of Israel that day stood at the river Jordan. They had been slaves in Egypt. They'd actually gotten comfortable as slaves, They had been in the wilderness wandering, but they'd actually even gotten comfortable in the wilderness. There was manna provided from heaven every day. There was water from the rock. And now they were at a new beginning. They were at the river. And they knew that to cross over into the land of Canaan was not going to be easy. They were going to have to fight. They were going to have to sacrifice. They were going to have to change their comfortable lifestyle. And the word from God to them that day is still the word to us. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. I will never leave you nor forsake you. All of us have transitions in life. Sometimes it's the transition of growing older. I was complaining about my knee last 2 nights ago, and Mike says, "Well, you're getting old." I thought, gee, thanks. Maybe he said, well, we're just getting old. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Transitions. Sometimes it's divorce. Sometimes it's death. Sometimes it's an illness. Sometimes it's going away to college, a new job, new financial realities. Sometimes it's a change at the church where we don't want change ever to happen. I applaud you on how you have accepted Summerfest this summer and the change in time. You've all been really, let me just not say all. Most of you have been very good sports about it. And God has done some wonderful things through it, hasn't he? He's helped us to meet new people. He's helped us to spend more time in relationship. God goes with us. God goes with us. Sometimes he has to shake us to get us to go. But he always has a plan around the corner. For some of us, that plan around the corner is heaven. For some of us, it's fairly close. And it is going to be awesome. It's going to be so much better than this merry-go-round of life that we're on. The heavenly carousel is waiting for some of us. Does it sound better? Oh, we're comfortable. We like it here, even though it's 107 today. I don't think it's going to be 107 in heaven, by the way. I think that's the other place. Change happens in our lives. Transitions occur. But the word today is, sometimes God even brings them about. And when he does, he has a better plan and purpose for us. He has something on this other side, around the corner. Our Heavenly Father has a journey and an adventure for us. Would you pray with me?